Business doesn't have to be as hard as you're making it. It's all about mastering a few key techniques, systems, and mindset. Welcome to Well-Oiled Operations. With over 2 million downloads, it's the go-to podcast dedicated to helping you increase your profit margins while getting your time back. I'm your host, Stacy Tuschl. I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years, and I own multiple seven-figure businesses. Whether you're a brick and mortar or an online business owner, it doesn't matter. I've got both, and I'll show you my framework to get you more customers in the door, more profit in your pocket, and more happiness in your home. It's time to get your business less reliant on you. Joey, welcome back to Well-Oiled Operations.
Stacy, it is an absolute privilege and delight to be here. As you know, I'm a huge fan of you. As you know, you're a case study in my newest book. I am so excited for our conversation, and thanks to everybody who's listening in as well.
Yes. Well, and when I remember I interviewed last time, we had some mix up with our Zoom links or something, and we were like super short on time and we were rushing. And I remember thinking like, I don't care if I can have 20 minutes, I will still make this a great episode. It was amazing, but I'm so grateful that you are able to come back and we get to dive in to even a new topic. So I am the biggest fan of never lose a customer again. I tell everybody about it. However, you have a new book out, Never Lose an Employee Again. So let's talk about that. First of all, when was the first book written?
So the first book came out in 2018. So it's been 5 years. It's hard to believe that it's been that long because it feels like yesterday. And not shortly after that, I started thinking about this book. And then this book has been written in the intervening weeks, months, and years since then. Where did the idea start coming from? So as is often the case, I think when you write a book, and this is something you're all too familiar with, the ideas end up coming from multiple places, right? It's for me at least, there was never one triggering thing that kind of flipped the switch and made me say, okay, we're going to do this. But one of the things that dramatically contributed to it was about 3 or 4 months after my first book came out, I got an email, and the email was from a reader that I'd never met. And the email just said, "Dear Joey, if you wrote a book called Never Lose an Employee Again, I would buy it." And it was signed with their name. Now, as somebody who loves marketing the way I know you love marketing, this is called a sign from the marketplace that there might be an opportunity. But it was a single sign, right? Yes. It was a single signal. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I wrote him back. I was like, oh, thank you so much. If I ever think about writing that, I'll, do. And then I got another email and another one and another one. Again, no additional context. All it said is, "Dear Joey, if you wrote a book called Never Lose an Employee Again, I'd buy it." Signed by the reader. And I thought, there might be something here. I got to be honest, Stacy. I wasn't as personally in touch with the challenges of being an employer with employees as I could have been, because for about a decade, I had been a solo entrepreneur. I hadn't had any employees, not even an assistant.
Yeah.
And when I started doing the research and when I started thinking about this, I realized this is actually a bigger pain point for most employers than losing customers. Losing employees kind of cuts to the bone. It hurts worse. It's a bigger thing. There's more consequence. There's more ripple effect across all of your customer relationships.
Oh my goodness.
Now you're trying to deliver value with fewer people on the team to do it. So when I got connected with that pain, I realized this is something I think we could help people with.
Yeah. Okay. What I love that you brought up is it was one sign. And sometimes for everybody listening, we get one request from somebody, and it's usually not the right request, but we're like, oh my goodness, I should do it. I love that you're like, it happens so many times. Like, I want everybody to hear, sometimes it's not a sign. It's just one request. That's shiny object syndrome. And I think for you, Joey, this was like such a no-brainer. I think you could have read the first book and translated it to employee immediately. Now, having seen this book, there's just so much more detail that I could see the reason and the need for going deeper, and the thoroughness. When we talked last time, you were in the process of writing, you were not done yet. And you're like, oh, I'm going to 7 continents. And I'm like, wait, what is happening? So first of all, I would love to hear what this book has, like what you've put into it, what the writing process has been like, the research you've done. I would love for you just to share a little bit.
Well, I so appreciate that, Stacy. And similar to kind of we were saying, it's not just one signal.
Yeah.
There were multiple inputs. So I don't think I've revealed this to anyone before. My wife knows this, but I don't think anybody else knows. The first draft of the book, what I actually did was took the first book, Never Lose a Customer Again, did a find and replace for the word customer to employee. I'm not making this up.
I love it.
And that was the first draft. And then I read through it to see if the same methodology, the same thought process, same philosophy would work. And it did.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we've got a foundation.
Yep.
I then erased that and started from scratch.
Okay.
I kept the same chapters, but I didn't use the same words. And I said, all right, how do I tell the story of this phase from an employee context instead of a customer context? Additionally, what was really important, I'm very proud of the first book. I think lots of times as authors, we write our first book, and when we look back at it with hindsight, there are things we wish were different, things we would have done differently. But it's a big deal. It's a big deal getting it written.
I can't tell you how many people had said your name before I ever met you. Like, to me, you were a big deal. I was like, I am interviewing Joey Coleman. Like,
you're too
this
kind.
book, like I in my programs, I tell my clients, you have to read this book if you want to learn about fulfillment and client delivery. And I
so
love
that.
And what's funny too is whenever I talk about strategies, about team building and wowing your team, and I always tell people that don't have a team, just replace it with customer, because you can do this too. And I think you have proven absolutely this stuff goes together. So
absolutely. Yes. Yeah. It's two sides of the same coin. And thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And, so I'm thinking about the book and I'm thinking about the inputs and what I'm going to do. And while I definitely stand by what's in the first book and I'm proud of what's in the first book, and we had 46 case studies in the first book, I had two thoughts leading into this book. Number one, we got to have more case studies. People love the case studies. We got to have more. My publisher was like, are you kidding me? You had 46 in the last one. I was like, we're going to 50 and beyond. We're at least going to get that far. I also have readers all over the world, which I'm very thankful for. And while my first book had case study examples that happened outside the United States, the majority of the ones that were in there were from Canada, which is great. It's its own separate country. I love me some Canadians, had my launch party there for the new book. But I wanted to have a global perspective. And the reason I wanted to have a global perspective is not only because I just think that's the right thing to do as a human being in 2023, but a lot of times people will say, well, you don't understand, Joey. In our country, in our culture, it's different. And it is. And I respect that. But what I know to be true is that humans are humans. And as a general rule, when it comes to work, all human beings on the planet want the same thing. They want to do work that matters. They want to feel that they're fairly compensated for the work that they do. And they want to be able to see the impact of the work they're doing and be appreciated by their customers, their boss, their coworkers for the contribution they're making to the work. That I found on all 7 continents. So the book actually has case studies from all 7 continents, including Antarctica. Went to Antarctica. We had to get a case study from Antarctica as well. And so it was able to kind of have that full breadth and experience. Yeah. I also wanted to tell, the second goal I had is I wanted to tell the story of companies that, just to be completely blunt, weren't run by white, middle-aged heterosexual males. Sorry, there are lots of companies in the world. I wanted to have a perspective, ideally, so that anyone reading this book could say, there's someone in this book that is in the same industry as me, has the same team as me, has the same revenues as me, has the same beliefs as me, the same culture as me, the same skin color, the same gender, fill in the blank, that they could look at it and say, I see someone like me in here. And hopefully that's a bridge for them to try some of these ideas.
Oh, I love it. How long did it take you to go to all 7 continents and do this?
Well, I had the pleasure of visiting 6 of the 7 continents before I even started writing the book.
Okay.
So the only one I hadn't been to was Antarctica. That came during the writing of the book. But I had friends in these different places. And then I also, one of the ways that story leads on to story, which I absolutely love, I went and talked to all the people that were case studies in the first book. Okay. And I also said, what companies do you admire? Who are you paying attention to? And if given the chance, before you answer, please tell me the names of companies that I haven't heard of before. And they're like, well, what do you mean, Joey? I was like, well, if you're going to say Apple, and Apple's great, don't get me wrong, Apple's got a lot of things to model. Beautiful. But what about companies I haven't heard of? And as a result, I got small companies, medium-sized companies, really unique and different companies. And I'm really proud that over 50% of the case studies in this book come from companies with less than 100 employees, which is great because over 90% of the companies on the planet have less than 100 employees.
Yeah.
So my goal was to write a book with stories that people could say, I could do that. I've got the team to do that, the revenues to do that, the impact to do that. And so that was really important to me with the case studies as well.
I love it. And I think when we can look at a company and go, like you said, I can do that, right? I think it's great when we read books from like Starbucks and Apple and what Amazon's doing and all of that. Great. But there's something in you that's going to say, but that's Amazon.
Yes.
That's Apple. And when you can go, oh, wait a minute, that's just this guy I've never heard of before with a small business just like mine, and he's doing that, you all of a sudden really take on that identity of, so can I. And if they actually believe it, there's a better chance they're going to implement it at the end of that book.
So true. So true. And I also like the idea of saying, if you are the type of employer that wants to be the employer of choice in your community, in your state, in your country, on the planet, whatever, for the thing you do, you can do it. You don't need to wait to ask permission. You don't need to wait until you have $1 billion in revenue. If you're committed to being remarkable, all it really takes is making that choice. After that, implementation becomes a lot easier.
Yes. Okay. So I think one of the biggest things I hear when people are like coming kind of into our programs, they have this belief that nobody wants to work. It's hard to find people right now. They want $1 million. What do you want to tell those people? Because I know that this is inside of the book as well.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say, I feel your pain. I understand and I empathize with how hard it is to be an employer. It's always been hard to be an employer. It's particularly hard right now. Part of the reason it's particularly hard right now is because expectations from employees have changed. Now, we can have a whole discussion, probably a 5-hour podcast, about why those expectations have changed. But I would say they fall into at least one of two big buckets. Number one, the just natural evolution of the worker, right? And the fact that workers today expect more than workers from 50 years ago, expect more than workers from 100 years ago. This is the human condition. This is biology. This is nothing that, isn't, that we can stop or impede. The second reason is because employers caused it. Now, I know I'm going to get some folks that are like, Joey, I was liking the podcast. I was with you. I was gelling with Stacy. Now Joey's kind of throwing punches towards that. No, here's the thing. Most offer letters, especially in the United States, that go out to a new employee, somewhere in the offer letter say, and as a reminder, this is an at-will position. You can be terminated at any time for any reason. Is that really the way we want to start a relationship? Do we really want to start a relationship on, kind of what should be the moment of celebrating their new position in our organization by saying, but hey, you're at arm's length. We might decide tomorrow that we don't want you. There's no stability. There's no security. There's no certainty. Human beings want those things. And traditionally, that's what employment provided. If we really look at employment of people moving off the farm in the agrarian society into offices in the more industrial revolution, industrialized society, one of the appeals was getting a regular paycheck, not having to wait till the harvest to have any money. Right? This comes from somebody who grew up in Iowa. Like, I'm a farm kid, right? This was a big appeal of office work. And for many years, corporations were like, hey, if you're committed to us, if you're focused with us, you're going to get a pension. You're going to get a gold watch when you retire. You're going to be promoted over time if you're willing to work hard and put in the time and the effort. And then we decided that that didn't make sense anymore. And we started doing mass layoffs. We started raiding pension funds. We started eliminating benefits. We started paying people only hourly, not sourly, even if they were doing kind of a salary type job. We tried to make everyone a 1099 contractor. We kind of brought this on ourselves a little bit. And so while I have empathy for the leaders who are saying it's so hard now, we kind of made it ourselves. The good news is there's solutions. The good news is there's a way to get out of this muck and mire. The good news is there's a way to stand out in the marketplace and become the employer of choice. But you have to be willing to acknowledge that the landscape isn't going back to the way it was. We're not going back to pre-COVID. We're not going back to the 90s. We're not going back to the 60s, the 50s, the 40s. None of that. We're going forward. And when we think about going forward, we need to acknowledge the changing expectations of employees, the changing expectations of employers, and the changing expectations of the marketplace. When we acknowledge all three of those things, we see that our thinking needs to evolve, but more importantly, our actions need to evolve.
So good. Well, and here's the thing. We are more in control than I think sometimes we want to admit. We're like, this is the world. This is not my fault. There's nothing I can do, right? But I do think we can be intentional. And like you said, really understand and look and take ownership and accountability of what we can actually change.
Absolutely. There's so many examples in the book where when the HR team went to the legal team and said, we want to do this, the legal team first said, nope, can't do it. But through some great perseverance by some really creative leaders, they said, no, go back and figure out a way to do it. And as a recovering lawyer, okay, I used to be an attorney. Most lawyers, especially in a corporate setting, are conditioned to say no. They're conditioned to say, nope, that's too wacky. That's too crazy. That's not going to work. You need to invest in the relationship with your legal team to say, hey, this is what we need to do. Help me get creative in figuring out how we can do it. And I would posit that when your goal is to create remarkable experiences for your employees, your lawyers will be able to figure out a way to do that in a remarkable and creative way that is in full compliance with your local laws and jurisdictional rules, but creates a different vibe than what other employers are offering.
So good. Okay, there's this one sentence I wrote down from the book that I would love for you to explain. So you talk about how every employee has coworkers, but not every employee has colleagues. Can we talk about that?
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. There are definitely some sentences in the book that were designed to make people go, wait a second, what? And you hit on one perfectly, Stacy, in that when you go to a new job and you walk into the building, the other people that are in the building are your coworkers. I define coworkers as people that work in the same organization, as a general rule, getting a paycheck from the same entity that pays them for their time and their contribution. A colleague is something totally different. A colleague is the person that when you walk into the office, they already know what you did this weekend. They're not asking how was your weekend to find out what you did. They're asking to find out how it went. They know about your personal relationships. They know if you have children or pets. They know what your dreams are, your hopes, your fears, what's going on in your life. They're your friends at work. All the research shows if you have a friend at work, you are more productive, you have better engagement, and you stay longer. Now, there's some employers right now, Stacy, are listening. They're going, this is hogwash. I shouldn't be responsible for my people having friends at work. No, I'm not saying you're responsible for it. But what I am saying is foster it, encourage it, allow it, support it. I'm not saying you have to give them their friends, but build a culture that is designed to create colleagues instead of satisfied with having coworkers.
Yes. Okay. This is so huge. And I have seen this in my studios where I remember actually after one of our dance recitals, we were putting things away in the studio and I said, oh, what are you doing tonight? And this one guy was like, oh, me and the two others, we're going to go to dinner. And I was like, oh my God, like these employees are going to dinner after work on their own. And he has a studio credit card. And I said, you know what? Have dinner on me. I love that you guys are doing that. And first of all, they already think it's amazing that they were able to hang out with each other. And
the boss is paying for dinner? Like, this is amazing.
Yes. And I think they were surprised to see me encourage something like that. But I love when I see the friendships being formed because I do like, it's not just, I need them to be loyal to me when they're loyal to each other and loyal. It's the company, it's the environment, the atmosphere and everything.
Stacy, it is so true. I mean, a couple thoughts. Number one, it's a lot harder to quit your friends than to quit your job.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's a lot harder because we're like, what is my life going to be like? I'm going to have a new friend group. I'm going to be a new place of employment. What is this even going to feel like? Not to mention from a productivity, from an efficiency, from a connectivity point of view, every business has situations where one employee is overwhelmed with work for whatever reason, like, they've got stuff in their personal life, a client is overly needy, they're on a big deadline, whatever it may be, we want our other team members to be able to jump in and help, pitch in where they can. It's a lot easier to support when your friend says, hey, I'm drowning with this proposal. Can you help me edit it? Than when your coworker says, I'm not able to get my work done. Can you do my work? See, there's a difference there. It's a total difference. And if we foster colleagues instead of allowing and only supporting coworkers, we create that type of opportunity for support and morale improvement within the team.
Yeah. And like, just think about you yourself and walking into an environment. How comfortable do you feel when you actually are friends with these people, or they're kind of strangers to you, right? Walking in and just feeling comfortable is a huge benefit of working at a company that we aren't even promoting, advertising, talking about, right? I love that people come in and they're like, oh, wow, they like each other. Like they're actually like hanging out with each other, right? I think that's so powerful. So I love that you brought that up in the book.
Well, I so appreciate it. Yeah, it's something that, again, if instinctually this doesn't make sense to you, you're like, I don't know, it feels a little weird, feels a little touchy-feely. This is business, not personal. Fine. The book is filled with research that proves the point. Studies have been shown. There was a huge study done by Sun Microsystems. They had over 1,000 people participate in their mentor-mentee program, basically their buddy program, right? Who's your buddy at work? What they found is that people in the program over-indexed on productivity, success, promotions, longevity by a magnitude over people that weren't in the program. Again, this cut across all aspects, all divisions, all roles, all levels of the organization. When you feel like you have a mentor, a buddy, a friend, even a mentee at work, you feel more connection to what you do.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, so good. Okay, so just like in the last book, you brought up the 6 forms of communication, which love. I do think the diversification of the way you reach out and all of that is so important. So I would love to dive into that a little bit. But what I'm curious about is, especially since 2020, a lot of people went remote and stayed remote. So can we kind of talk about, first of all, what are those 6 forms of communication? And then we can kind of dive into the remote stuff.
Absolutely. So the 6 forms of communication are as follows: in-person interactions, emails, physical mail or snail mail, sending someone in the post, phone, which includes both phone calls and text messages, videos, and GIFs. Now, here's the interesting thing, Stacy. COVID comes along and so many businesses go remote. What happens immediately? We lose all in person. So the number one way we used to interact with our employees, we're all under the same roof working together, vanishes overnight. It disappears and it's not coming back anytime soon. In some businesses, it was months. In some, it was years. In some,
it was permanent.
They still aren't back and never will be. It's permanent. So we've taken that tool and dramatically reduced the number of times it gets used and the power and the benefits of having in-person interactions. What did we do then? Well, we looked at email and we looked at video, right? Zoom, Teams, whatever you're using. And we just poured all of our effort into that, which is fine. And that's what the times called for. But when we over-index on any one or two of these tools to the exclusion of the other tools, we start to burn out our people. And the reason we burn them out is because humans want variety. They want different types of interactions. I understand you use email. And by the way, whenever I say email, if you're like, oh, we actually use Slack, that's an email with a different brand. Okay, sorry. Love me some good
when
Slack.
You have to clear, when you have to clear an inbox, it is email. Like, let's just call it what it is.
When you dread opening a software tool because there are messages in it, it's email. Okay. So by the way, if you're using Facebook Messenger, whatever tool you're using for your communication, this is the same thing. So what we found is the companies that succeeded the best in this increasingly remote era are the ones who found ways to get outside of the digital communication and get back to some analog communication. So what do I mean by that? Sending things in the mail, physical things that employees could receive at their home, giving gifts and presents, not online gift cards, physical presents delivered to them, given to them, bringing the team together for in-person retreats, collaboration, opportunity to actually see each other, and even text messages, which I know is digital, but it's outside of the usual format, right? We're not expecting all the messages to come via text. We're expecting them to come through email and through doing video conference calls. So the more we moved into those other tools, the more connection we were able to create. I'd love to, if it's okay, can I tell a quick story about somebody?
Yes.
All right. So one of the folks I interviewed for the book and became a great case study in the book is a guy by the name of Daniel Budai, and he runs a place called Budai Media. Now, when I first connected with Daniel, similar to when I connected with you, I was being interviewed on his podcast. Okay. This guy was so neat, so cool. I said, I'd love to know more about how you run your business. We were 5 minutes into the conversation. I was like, I want you to be a case study in my book. He has 30 employees operating in 17 different time zones around the world. So anybody who says, oh, you cannot, really, I'm not a global business. He's a global business with 30 employees. Okay. This is huge. And because they're global, they don't see each other in person as much. So he came up with a great idea for creating connection with his people. Whenever somebody new is hired, they receive a package in the mail. And that package in the mail says, don't open it. Hold on until you're on the call with everybody else to open it. And they all get on the call, and they're on their first call together where they're meeting the team. So they've got all these little windows with people all over the world, and everybody's on the call. And they say, okay, open the box. And when you open the box, you pull out a mug. Now, the mug doesn't have the Budai Media logo on it. The mug has photographs of all the people on the team, including you. It's a brand new mug with everyone on the team. And they say, and we raise a glass to you joining the team. And everyone on screen lifts up their mugs and does a toast to the person who now has a physical artifact that they're part of something bigger than themselves. And whenever they have team meetings, people drink out of their mugs, they cheers on the mugs, they do that type of thing. It's a little investment. This is like less than $20, right? The hardest thing actually is logistically mailing it to other people in the world. That's where the challenge comes in. But what I love about this is from the very beginning of the relationship, it says you are seen and you are appreciated. You are valued. You're part of something bigger than yourself. You're part of this team. And whenever they see that mug, what do? They think of their work. They think of their coworkers. They think of their colleagues. And they think about how they're part of this unit now that is bigger than themselves.
So cool. And this is what I'm talking about. Like if you would have wrote the book of just like your experiences and what you've had, you wouldn't have this like different, unique twist and take. And just, I think the case studies just make it so much more tangible and like, oh, I could try this, or I could take a piece of that, or I could merge those two, things like that.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate that. Yeah. And I'm the first to say any success, any delight that people find reading in this book, all the credit goes to the case studies. They're what made this book, right? These are amazing leaders, amazing founders, owners, folks running businesses who recognized early on that they would not have the success they have if not for their people. And I would also point out that most of these folks don't think of them as their employees. They think of them as their people. Their team, their colleagues, right? They're even using language that is more inclusive, that is more, hey, we're all in this together. Somebody asked me the other day, since I wrote the book, I've actually started hiring people, which is kind of funny, right? So now I actually have employees. And somebody asked me the other day and they're like, well, how many people work for you? I said, 0. And they're like, oh, you're a solo entrepreneur. I was like, no. No one works for me. People work with me. We have a shared goal. Yes, the business pays that. I don't pay them. The business pays them.
Yeah.
And getting out of our egocentric selves, which I get that your ego helped you start your business, right? Entrepreneurs need great egos to decide to jump into the fray, to lean into the market and try to create something out of the ether. I get it. But if you stay in that spot too long, it creates problems with the other folks who are on your team. The more you think of I'm the employer, you're the employees, the less connection in a personal and emotional way you have. It's really hard to have engaged people who want to
Mhm.
stay with you for a long time if they are the employees that work for you,
Yeah.
right? That's just not what motivates people to come to work every day and stay year after year.
I actually had somebody, this was like a decade ago. We used to call our team staff. I think I came from like a dance world, camp staff.
Totally. It's a very
that was
common
just like a
word.
phrase. Yeah. And somebody on the team said, could you stop calling us staff? Could we call ourselves team? And I was like, sure. Like to me, I was like, no big deal. But it was a big deal to her. Right. And we have since always used the word team. And now it just that's just what comes out of my mouth is like, and like, we'll even say, hey, team, like when we jump on a Zoom. It's just a phrase we use. And maybe you, the owner, thinks nothing of it, that they are noticing what you call them and what you like, right? So
100%.
I love finding that word.
Well, Stacy, and I got to tell you, for me, I've heard, I don't know that I've heard all the words, but I've heard a lot of them in doing the research for this book. I've alighted on my favorite word being team. And here's why. Not only does it imply in the nature of the word that we're all in this together, that we're only going to succeed if everybody's in harmony on the same page, working towards the same goal, but it also clearly says there is a goal. We're not just a bunch of people standing around. We're working together collaboratively towards winning, whatever winning is and however you want to define winning. The other thing that I really like about a team is when I say team, whether you think of a bunch of kids playing soccer, that are elementary school age kids, whether you think of the high school baseball team or softball team, whether you think of it as the pro college team playing football or the pro team playing soccer, we don't expect those people to be on the team forever. Right? We get the team together for a period of time, but then we get new team members and some of the old team members leave. And eventually all of the core team is going to be replaced with an entirely new core team. This isn't bad.
Right.
This is how life works. And I think we have so many leaders that are like, oh, if you leave, you're dead to me. Or how would you dare quit and move on to something else?
Right.
And especially in this day and age where 65% of employees are actively considering a new job. 65% are actively considering a new job. If we come to it from a place of scarcity, that if you're not on our team, you're dead to us, you're going to have a hard time. What I would rather see leaders do is say, this is our team for this moment. How can we win a championship with this team? And then decide if we have the resources, the capability to go for the championship again with the same people, or whether we need to move some pieces around on the chessboard and get some new players and other players go to other teams and go do other things. Just because they're on another team doesn't mean you have to denigrate them. You have to be angry with them. It's just they've moved to a different phase or a different part of their life. We can still be in contact, which by the way, leads to great opportunities for boomerang employees who come back to work for you, which I know you've had those and they're amazing. Also leads great opportunities for referrals to other clients and customers, because now our folks who are part of our team are embedded with some of our clients or some of our prospects. Huge possibilities if we come to this from a place of abundance as opposed to a place of scarcity.
Okay. I love that analogy so much. And even captains change, coaches change, right?
Totally.
And it is such a great analogy, but also the perfect word when we're already using it. And I also think too, a team is no longer sometimes just employees. Sometimes they're contractors. And do you look at your contractors different than employees and all of that? So I just think this is such a good conversation of just even watching the language we're using to make them feel, like you said, seen, heard, valued, recognized, all of that. Oh, Joey, we could talk forever and ever. Here's what I want to give you, pitch your book. What is in this book besides all the gold you just gave us? What is in there that they have to go read the book versus just getting this episode and being done?
Well, two thoughts. Let's come from it philosophically, and then let's come at it practically. So philosophically, there are so many books out there to read. Okay. I'm addicted to books. I'm proud to say I have a book addiction. I have over 6,000 books in my house. On average, we're getting 3 to 5 new books in the house per week. I can't keep up with all the books I have. That doesn't even count the books that my friends are writing and sending me and my clients and stuff like that. So I'm a big consumer of books. I believe there are 3 types of books. There are books that make you think differently. There are books that make you feel differently. And there are books that make you act differently. And while I certainly want everyone that reads either of my books to think and feel differently, if they don't act differently, I haven't earned your investment of time. Speaking of scarcity, you're not going to be able to read every book that's ever been written. You don't have the time. There are too many books being printed and published and created every year. You're not going to get to it. If you're going to invest time in reading my book, I want it to change the way you think, change the way you feel, but most importantly, change the way you act. So this book was written from that lens, philosophically, that it will change the way you think, change the way you feel, but more importantly, change the way you act, which gets to the practical piece of why I think this book is worthy of your investment. There are over 50 case studies. You are going to learn things in this book that I promise you, you've never thought about. Things that have been proven. These aren't Joey's ideas. This isn't Joey sitting in a room going, it'd be really cool if employers did this. No, this is Joey going out to people all around the world who are running remarkable, industry-leading, crushing businesses to say, what are you doing? What are you doing that's working? And would you be willing to share that in a way to inspire others to maybe follow in the same footsteps or do something similar? So we know this stuff works. Last thing I'll say from a practical point of view, and this is something that was really important to me to put in the book. In the first chapter, that's how important it was. First chapter, I have 2 charts. And the charts break down the more than 50 case studies that are in the book in 2 different ways. One of the charts shows them by number of employees. Because you might be listening saying, Joey, I have 6 employees. Like, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to learn from Apple and Amazon and do. Great. There's other companies that have less than 10 employees. Or you might be saying, Joey, I've got 100 employees. I have very different problems than I had back when there were just 6 of us. Great. There's examples for you. Yeah. So one chart breaks them down by employees. The other one breaks them down by revenues. Because here's what I hear from leaders all the time. They're like, Joey, this taking care of your people stuff, it sounds amazing. It sounds great. But guess what? How are we going to pay for this? It breaks all the companies down by revenues.
Love it.
And you should be able to look at anyone who has less revenue than you do and do everything they're doing because you have more money than they do, just naturally by your revenues. So my goal is that people can use this as a practical playbook for addressing specific problems they have in their business. And because it talks about the 8 phases of the employee journey, wherever you are in your employee journey and wherever those people are, you can dive specifically into that phase and find targeted examples of things to make it better.
Okay, they're going to think this was a scripted question because that was the best pitch ever. I'm like, what? That was amazing.
Thank you.
Completely true. Like, this is a book that when we read your other book, we don't read it as we're sitting down. We read a chapter and then we talk about it and then we do it. And then we come back. And you're a book that your book is a book we read over and over when we're ready to up level the journey, right? So to me, these are books that are going to stay in your library. I also have a book addiction. I just said to my husband, I left out my books that I have not read yet purposely where I can see them. And I said, I'm not going to buy another book until I read those. And he laughed out loud because he knows.
Because he knows that's not true. It's not going to happen.
And then thankfully your book came like right after, but you sent it to me. I did not buy it. And I was like, perfect. I technically didn't buy this book. So it was on the top of my to read list. So Joey, this has been phenomenal. I am going to shout this book out from the rooftops because I know, first of all, I believe you don't want to build a business without a team. Like, hands down, I do not believe, like, I really think it just makes our life easier.
Well, Stacy, if I may, forgive me for interrupting.
Yeah.
I was the guy who was doing it by myself.
Yeah.
For over a decade, I was a solo entrepreneur.
Yeah.
In the last year, I've added 3 people to the team. It's had challenges. Don't get me wrong. I wrote a book on how to do this and I've still had challenges. But oh my goodness, the impact we are able to have, the speed at which we're able to move, the number of people we're able to serve has exploded because I was willing to involve more people than myself in the conversation.
100%. People are like, how do you get so much done? I'm like, oh, it's not just me. Like, don't let me fool you here. I have a whole team behind me doing stuff, right? Like, you don't see them. They're working, right? So Joey, where can they find the book? Fill us in. Where can they find you? All the things.
So Stacy, one of the things that was really important to me, because I'm an experienced guy, right? So I want to create a great experience for my readers and my listeners and my viewers. Different people consume books in different ways. So it was important to me that the day the book came out, it was available as a hardcover book because I want it to sit on your shelf and you to refer back to it year after year after year, as an ebook in case you like it to just highlight and read on the go, as well as an audiobook. And if you've enjoyed the sound of my voice, I narrate the audiobook so you can hear me tell these stories. Cool. So it's available in all three formats wherever you get books. I'm agnostic. Some of you love Amazon, some love Barnes and Noble, some are the indie bookstore. It doesn't matter. You can get it at any of those folks in any of those formats. The best place to connect with me is on my website, joeycoleman.com. That's Joey, like a 5-year-old would spell it, or a baby kangaroo. Coleman, Coleman, like the camping equipment, but no relation, joeycoleman.com. There you'll find information about my first book, Never Lose a Customer Again, about the new book, Never Lose an Employee Again. There's videos, there's ways to reach out. I do workshops, I do speaking engagements. My goal is to raise the bar on experience on the planet. The experience we're delivering to our customers, the experience we're delivering to our team members, our employees. So if I can help anybody in enhancing their experiences, I would love to have that conversation.
So good. And definitely get both books while you're at it. You might as well. I mean, they go hand in hand. You're going to
They do. I will say, they're kind of purposely designed to sit right next to each other and feel like siblings. Yes, the covers are very similar, the whole thing. For sure. I love it. Joey, thanks for being here. So good. Stacy, thank you. And thanks for being a case study in the book. By the way, if you're a fan of Stacy's, okay, if you want to know how she does all these remarkable things that you watch and you admire and you listen to her show and you follow her and you're involved in her programs because you're like, oh, Stacy's got it figured out. She has one of my favorite case studies in the book. And I say that with respect. Her case study can be applied by anyone in any industry in less than 2 days for $0. And it addresses the number one reason employees quit. The number one reason employees leave is specifically addressed by Stacy's case study for well-oiled operations in the book. That alone, I think, if you're a fan of Stacy's, you'll want to learn more. And I was going to say, I've never taught it on the podcast. Unless you're one of my clients, you have not heard me teach this. So, and it's brilliant. It's so good. It's so good. It's a juicy one. You'll love it.